So our job really is to water the seed, make sure it's nourished, be the gardeners.
And these first 3 years have a lifelong impact.
Hi, my name is Jill Stansbury.
My name is Manish, and this is my masterclass
on early brain development. Has to do with the advent of the MRI. And so really, since the early 90s, we've actually been able to see inside of brains when they're looking at images or hearing things. And in the last, maybe 5 or 6 years, MRI researchers created cues and ways for babies to be comfortable while they did their research. So we really have this whole next level understanding. We're born with about 100 billion neurons, and neurons are associated with our nervous system. So what they look like is there's a ball on one end, then a line, and then a little, almost like a tree, like the body of a tree and branches of a tree coming out. And so whenever we receive, say, a piece of language or remove something in our body, a neuron fires. And whenever we associate it, right? So I'm a baby, I've never heard a sound before, a sound comes up, a neuron fires. My parent then points to whatever the sound goes along with. So cup or hand, right? So then hand and cup get linked together inside my brain. And then those things, hand, cup, that's a little pathway inside my brain. So we call those neural pathways when things start to connect. And so the more we walk on those neural pathways, the more we fire them, right? Just like walking on a path in the grass. The first time we walk on a path in the grass, we finish our journey and the grass just bounces right back up. It's like we never walked on it. But if we walk on that path 50 or 100 times, then it becomes a permanent path that's there even when we're not there. So the more we link the word cup with the object cup, right? The more those neurons fire together. And the more they fire together, they wire together to make that permanent pathway inside the brain. And so the brain is like a sponge for language at this age. And the more connections that we make in the environment with the kids, the more we feed them the language of our movements, of our activities, the more this part of the brain will grow, the more information will be sucked into that absorbent mind. And it's the language of all different kinds of things, right? The language of science, well, that's leaves and trees and trunk and branch. So when you're out and about in the world with your baby, to be narrating these things is really helpful.
There's growing body of evidence in neuroscience that things such as rich language environment and positive care have lifelong implications for our little children. The kind of parenting they receive will decide what kind of individuals will they grow to be. What is their future going to be? Also, consider economics. There's research by Professor James Heckman, which again demonstrates that the focus on early years can deliver rich dividend for society.
Engaging in that serve and return. So whenever the baby expresses themselves with pointing or words, you respond. And as they become more complex with their language, so too should your response become more complex. Create a rich language environment. So this narration of what's happening around you, when we're going to go from the baby points to something in the sky, you point and say, that's a plane, to that's a plane. Where do you think it's going? And then give them lots of rich developmental experiences, opportunities to touch things, smell things, taste things, listen to all kinds of music, look at picture books, look at art, all these kinds of things. As rich an environment as we can have to give this sponge that is the absorbent mind to take in, so that is the foundation and the feeding. And then we want to do all of those things in a present, engaged, positive, affectionate, and calm way.
We recommend a simple yet very powerful process we like to call TTC.
It's very commonsensical. TTC means talk, tell, curate. Talk means you have conversations with your child. You have interactive conversations with your child. And you do that on a daily basis. Now, what that does is, on one side, because you're engaging with the child is feeling taken care of, and your bond with the child grows. But also at the same time, if you're using rich vocabulary, if you're introducing new words and ideas, that is contributing to the creation of a rich language environment. Tell means you tell stories, you sing rhymes, you play, you have fun with the baby all the time. Now that again, in turn, gets the neurons firing and contributes to a building of neural pathways. Curate means you select and bring new sights, sounds, smells, tastes, textures, and all kinds of sensory experiences for your child. You know, the Montessori kind of developmental experiences, and you will see your child thriving. You make a routine, you make a plan. You say, all right, I'm going to have a conversation with my child every day, or I'm going to curate one exciting sensory experience for my child every week. I'm going to tell 4 stories to my child every week, or I'm going to have 2 singing and playing sessions with my child every week, and so on. And I mean, these numbers are not sacrosanct, but the whole idea is to have a plan, have your content ready, and follow a routine. And that way you ensure that you're doing the right things. A very good analogy that I often use is physical fitness in adults. So we all know doing regular exercise is going to help us. Controlling what we eat is going to help us. But these very commonsensical things are so difficult to put in our routine. Still, we are not able to exercise every day. Still, we are not able to eat healthy every day. But if you follow a plan, that's why people go and join, the diet programs or physical exercise programs. And what it does is it gets you in the discipline of doing things. So TTC is something very similar, where you get in the discipline of doing things which you otherwise would anyways do. These are all day-to-day things that parents are supposed to do anyway. But in today's context, when people live in urban environment, in nuclear families, some of these things are difficult to come by. So what TTC does is it provides some very useful tools using which parents can effortlessly create that environment which is conducive for growth of the child.
In developmentally appropriate ways, we should be providing just a rich, nourishing environment for our young people. So the brain has its own timeline. And in particular, right, from 0 to 3, a lot of the things that are happening with rapid growth are around movement and around language. And so if we are feeding them language, if we're giving them opportunity to move about freely and explore the environment, and the ability to come back to the safety of us as they do that, then the brain that's a developmentally appropriate interaction to have with the child. But if we have unreasonable expectations, right? If we're expecting that a child whose brain is literally wired to have them be moving so that the brain can build itself, if we expect those tiny people to sit still, that's a developmentally inappropriate demand on the brain. The brain needs to get the patterns of language that come from these interactions, and also the social safety and connection that comes from these interactions as well. So it is appropriate to give our kids a language-rich environment. It's not as appropriate to have expectations that their brains will be abstract like older children's will. And we can put a lot of pressure on them to function in ways that are different than what's true for their development, but there are long-term consequences for that. There are things that don't get developed, right? Just as important as learning, say, academic content, more important than learning academic content is learning how to interact with people from 0 to 6. So the ability of the caretakers in my environment to interact with me, to model for me pro-social behavior, then my opportunities to practice that are so vital that we can tell when kids are 16, according to their academic performance, who had these connections, these positive attachments, and who had experiences that were developmentally appropriate, as opposed to young people who had expectations placed on them that weren't developmentally appropriate. I like to think about that our young kids are like acorns, right? And they have genetic programming. And no matter what happens, as long as the soil is right, there's enough water, that acorn is going to sprout and it's going to grow into a mighty oak tree, right? So your child has all of this programming about what to do, how to build a brain, and it knows its own schedule, right? It's on its own time. Different brains will develop in different areas, and it's very common for there to be uneven development in early childhood. So we want to be respectful of the natural timeline. So our job really is to water the seed, make sure it's nourished, be the gardeners.
If you ask me, the time is 0 to 3. 0 to 3 is perhaps the most important period in a child's life. And these first 3 years have a lifelong impact.
Well, I think some of it is just awareness, period. Like, we really haven't had a deep understanding of what was going on in the brain in early childhood that was shared widely throughout my culture, or most cultures, I think.
The issue is that today's parents, new parents, lead a very difficult life. More likely, they stay in the cities. More likely, they struggle to balance work and parenting. They are not able to spend the kind of time that they're required to spend with the child. We need to democratize this very powerful science of early years and make it accessible to each and every parent and each and every child. We need to make it so effortless that it fits into every life situation, and every parent is able to give the right kind of developmental environment to their children.
We live in stressful times. We have much less support than we ever did as parents, right? So some of us still live in cultures where we have multiple generations in the household, and the support of that, right? So if mom is feeling really overwhelmed, then grandma is there or grandpa is there to help out. Some of us live in cultures where that's not the case anymore, where it's just the nuclear family. So we're chronically stressed in a way that we might not have been if we had a supportive extended family around us. And that makes it very difficult for us to feel comfortable and able to be with our kids. A lot of times the way we deal with stress that's chronic, that doesn't end, is we might engage in maladaptive coping behaviors. If we got a kid over here and a phone over here and our attention is here, we're not making that eye contact that's going to teach that mind sight. And we're not returning when our kids are serving. We don't even know that they've served. And also, I think working a lot. So if we're physically not there because we have to work in order to survive, or if we have to work in order to meet our desire for things as opposed to relationships, then those things can all interfere as well.
Look, TTC is not rocket science. It's something very simple that all parents can do and they should do. The challenges are sometimes awareness and sometimes availability of time. So parents that I speak with, parents who do it regularly, they tell me that they spend a couple of hours every day preparing. So they will find activities, they will find content, they will buy stuff online, and they'll prepare everything to do daily sessions with their child. And then there are some parents who even struggle to make a plan that, all right, if I'm supposed to do this, what's relevant for my child? What kind of conversation should I have? What kind of story should I tell? In what sequence should I go about doing things? Now, all this is made very, very simple by our platform called Bablr Early Learning. Bablr makes it very, very easy for parents. So Bablr has a cool digital platform which is designed for parents. It also has an algorithm which creates personalized learning sessions for the child. So a parent who subscribes to Bablr would put in child's detail, and every day on the basis of age and progress of the child, the algorithm will recommend 8 or 10 things, which are essentially TTC activities that the parent can do with the child. And not just this, Bablr will also provide the relevant materials, content, which makes it very easy for the parent to do those activities. They don't have to spend time researching, they don't have to spend time looking for things. The entire time is actually spent with the child, which is the most meaningful way to spend your time. So for example, you want to have a conversation with your child. Bablr will give you, based on the age and the progress, a choice of topics that you can pick from. And it'll also give you a conversation guide. And then your app, which is for you, will also give you some talking points that you can use to have that conversation with your child. It'll give you a few stories every week that you can tell your child. It'll give you rhymes to sing and play. It'll give you show and play cards that you can show to your child and play with the child, and so on. So basically, Bablr is bringing everything together for you and making it very easy for you to do the activities. And because it is easy, you will do it a lot more. If it was difficult, someday you'll find time, someday you'll not find time. But because it's super easy, you will do it every day. And that in turn will ensure consistency. And consistency in turn will give the right dividends. And it really depends on what kind of time do you have. You can find 30 minutes, do a Bablr session in 30 minutes. But if you have more time, Bablr will give you enough content and enough ideas and suggestions to actually spend 2 very meaningful hours every day with your child. The beauty of it is that most of your time is spent with the child. That's where you get the maximum bang for your buck. Bablr perhaps is the most comprehensive 0 to 3 year program in the world. And with the help of this digital innovation and technology, we have made it super easy. Everybody can access it from the comfort of their homes. There are all kinds. There are those who know that they need to do this and they're making very conscious efforts, but perhaps they are struggling. They come to us and they tell us that, look, I am spending 3 hours every day preparing for this. And when they start using Bablr, it becomes super easy for them. They save that kind of time. And then there are those who probably are not very aware to start with, but they start with an open mind and then they realize that this is making such a huge difference to their child. And then there are those who do not believe they need to make any conscious efforts, and that's fine, power to them. All we want is that every parent is able to provide the right kind of developmental environment to their children at home, because 0 to 3 is a very, very critical window. What often people don't realize is that there is a significant difference between knowing the path and walking the path. So Bablr is meant for people who want to walk the path.
The world has significantly changed. I think about my own grandparents, and they were raised to work on farms. And so that's a really different skill set than is required than for people in the contemporary world who, I used to say, who are heading in the direction of working for themselves independently and remotely and having to make connections online, perhaps with people all over the world. I used to say that's where we're heading, but since COVID has really accelerated things, I know that's where I am right now, right? I'm speaking to you who may be on multiple different continents. I provide parenting courses and teacher training. There'll be people from 4 different continents whenever I do a training online. And so that's a really different skill set than is needed to function on a farm. When the person in charge on the farm says, get out of the way, you need to get out of the way without saying anything, because you might get stepped on or you might lose a limb in a piece of heavy machinery. But if we want to have analytical thinkers who are able to share ideas with people in a variety of settings, that's a different skill set. We do want to teach questioning, right? And so we have to think about what are the long-term outcomes of how I speak to this child or the actions that I take right now. Are they preparing them for that world where they have to create social contexts and relationships across continents? Are they preparing them for that world where they need to do what the person in charge of them says to do for safety? Or Again, if you think about the factory model, or where they're going to be doing the same thing over and over again for 40 years. I think my dad maybe had 3 jobs in his lifetime. Young kids today are predicted they will have 25 jobs in their lifetime. So that's going to require so much flexibility, adaptability, coherence, energy, all these things. So it's a different world.
As a parent, you're not just trying to give a good future to your child, but with your parenting, you're also writing a better future for our world. Children today are going to grow in a very different environment. They will have very different kind of challenges, and even some of our challenges that we have not been able to solve will be solved by these children. Hopefully, some of these children will find the permanent solution to the issue of climate change. Some of these children will actually develop a super vaccine that will make our world pandemic free forever, and so on. So whatever we do today, we just need to understand that we have this great opportunity with our parenting to literally write the future of the world. And I'm sure we all want a better future for our world. So if our efforts today help us get there, why not take that little extra step, be a little bit more open-minded, and find that opportunity to give the right ecosystem to our children. Let's invest in our children and create a better world.